One of the most closely watched races in the country, though, has been called. You just saw in that package. Florida is counting up all of its ballots, and neither candidate in both races is leading by more than a percentage point. In the Senate, former Florida Governor Republican Rick Scott looks like he will take the seat of incumbent Democrat Bill Nelson. This would be the third state win the former governor has.
And in the race to replace Rick Scott, Republican Ron DeSantis beat out his Democrat opponent, Andrew Gillum, by 0.8%. Geez, these are such tight races. Joining us now on the phone from Miami is WFOR political correspondent Jim DeFede. DeFede, right, Jim?
Correct.
Make sure I say your name right. So, Jim, let us break this down. DeSantis beat Gillum by less than a percentage point. This is now the third election where a Democrat has lost by about a percentage point. Why can't Democrats get over the hump?
Well, look, it's one of those things where it's about turnout. At the end of the day, Republicans keep turning out in much bigger numbers. You know, every time we go into one of these elections, Democrats talk about what a great get-out-the-vote operation they have, but at the end of the day, it's the Republicans who actually do the work and make it happen. Let me give you a basic example of what happened here. We saw a 62% turnout in the state of Florida, which is phenomenal. The problem was the two most Democratic counties, Broward and Miami-Dade County, only came out at about 55, 56%. The deep red parts of the state came out at almost 70%. So even though most of the votes are in South Florida, you know, in terms of a percentage, what you had was you run up a big score here, but not big enough. It's the exact same thing we saw in 2016. Everyone thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win the state of Florida, but Donald Trump just worked those red parts of the state and ended up victorious. He did the same thing here in helping Ron DeSantis and Governor Scott take a Senate seat.
So it's interesting, right? I mean, I think, Jim, we can say that Florida still remains squarely Trump country because there were a lot of people who thought perhaps in 2016 that Democrats had actually done a better job of registering voters, registering Democrat voters, and also getting folks to vote early. Doesn't appear that that had any kind of effect. And I know that the president visited Florida many, many times in the run-up to this election. That certainly had an effect in certainly bringing DeSantis, his protege, over the finish line.
No, absolutely. This Donald Trump made two visits in the final days of this election, one in the Fort Myers area, one in Pensacola. Those are Republican strongholds. He ginned up the base, you know, in exactly the way that he can when he comes in. You know, again, I think this is, for Democrats, this is incredibly demoralizing. There is now not a single Democrat elected statewide in the state of Florida. Going into 2020, you know, this spells real problems for whoever the Democratic nominee is. And if you just want to know just how strong Donald Trump's clout is, Ron DeSantis, when he first won the nomination, thanks to Donald Trump, by the way, he was Donald Trump's handpicked candidate to become the nominee. But once he got the nomination and won the primary, Ron DeSantis really got off to a rocky start. For the first 3 or 4 weeks, he was on defense after making a comment about how he didn't want to see Andrew Gillum monkey up the state. What happened? What came to the rescue? Donald Trump sent in his own campaign team to help take over the DeSantis campaign. Donald Trump's campaign manager from 2016 in Florida, took over the Ron DeSantis campaign and brought it home.
So, listen, can we talk a little bit about Rick Scott and Bill Nelson? So he unseats Bill Nelson, who's the incumbent. Rick Scott got a lot of attention in regards to the gun control debate after the Parkland shooting. What do you account for his win here?
Again, Rick Scott ran a phenomenal campaign. Whether you like Rick Scott's policies or not, you have to acknowledge that he ran a very smart campaign throughout this year. You just mentioned the Stoneman Douglas shooting. Normally, that would be a real problem for a Republican who has long been supported by the NRA, but Rick Scott saw that early on, and as soon as the Parkland shooting happened, helped engineer a bill through the legislature in Tallahassee, the Stoneman Douglas Act, that raised the age to purchase a weapon from 18 to 21, put in all sorts of other regulations, distanced himself from the NRA, blunted that attack. He's done the same thing with other things. He's been willing to criticize the president on issues like Puerto Rico, child separation. Not really in the president's face, but just enough to send a message to folks here. So he triangulated at every opportunity just the right amount. Bill Nelson, Bill Nelson always has had a problem in Florida. He has never really been someone who is out very strong in the state. He spends most of his time in Washington. They were able to portray him as out of touch. Look, the Scott campaign also went out of its way to use certain dog whistles about his age, constantly referring to him as confused, a nice way to sort of say he's old and outdated. and that sort of wanted to, again, why Rick Scott. And the fact that, let's not forget, Rick Scott willing to put $60 million of his own money into the race and keep finding it at every chance when he needed that extra push was also a big factor.
And money can make a big, big difference. Jim DeFede, thank you so much.
Thank you.